There we go. Got it.
My head is.
You got it.
So
Like you did, like push
Yeah,
the
yeah,
button
yeah.
back.
Welcome, everybody. We will call the meeting of the Legislative Committee for the City of Salem to order. Let's go around and do in-person actual introductions when we can see your faces for real and not on some box on the screen for the first time in 3 years. Seems like it's been forever. Let's start with you.
All right, hi, I'm Trevor Upkeys. I'm a lieutenant with the Salem Police Department, and in the past I've had experiences from Salem PD with people experiencing homelessness, behavioral health issues, and traffic team.
Great.
Greg Hadley, Assistant Chief with Fire. And, you know, the last few years for me, it's really been the bills that the state is pushing out for wildfire. I don't know, statewide, they're looking at trying to obviously reduce wildfire risk. Other than that, like Trevin said, some of the same issues when it comes to behavioral health and the different things that are out in the street is what we predominantly are dealing with. Fire, I probably out of everybody in this committee has the least amount of work and bills that come our way that are specific to fire. So,
Thank you.
Sarah Long, I'm with Urban Development, and historically, a lot of our time is spent on making sure the programs that provide financial incentives for developers continue to be funded, whether that's industrial site readiness, whether that's our enterprise zones, opportunity zones, things of that nature, and then sort of just the wide variety of things that urban development still kind of covers. And then I also sit in with the Oregon Economic Development Association. They have a legislative committee. So I've been on that the last probably 7 or 8 years, and then I co-chaired it for the last 4 sessions.
great, thank you.
Hello, I'm Jessica Blakely with Salem Housing Authority. I've been working in the housing field for about 23 years and served on government relations for about a decade of that. Been working primarily with this body to bring forth any housing bills that meet the priorities for the city of Salem. I also serve on the housing as a member of the Housing Alliance as well as the Housing Authority of Oregon. So I bring forth legislation where those two bodies have maybe already reviewed the bills as they have their own lobbyists, and then something that maybe the city would want to support.
Great.
Good morning. I am Nicole Holmes. I work with Perseverance Strategies. Worked with Justin for 25, nearly 25 years now.
It's behind the machine.
Yeah. And have been helping out behind the scenes with the City of Salem for the last 5 years. A little over 5 years.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Martin, and I am your contract lobbyist. As Nicole mentioned, our firm, Perseverance Strategies, is a very small government relations firm. This is what you get. We don't have anybody else. It's just us, and we like it that way. I'm a born and raised Salem kid. You know, went to high school at McKay and went to Chemeketa to get, first of my numerous degrees, and just really proud to represent the city. Our firm also represents Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. We represent the Oregon Tribal Gaming Alliance. We represent the Oregon Alliance of Boys and Girls Clubs. We do a little work with the Oregon School Boards Association. We also have the COG. So about 5 or 6 clients. That way we can really pay close attention to what's going on. So just really thankful for the work that we've been able to do for the last 5 years. We've shown a lot of success. That's great. That's in the past. Now, as we look to the future, I just look forward to working with each and every one in this room. And again, not to be too long, and you've heard me say this like a broken record, we really have a special team. I've had a lot of clients over the past 26 years. Not everybody works this well together. Not everybody is this responsive, and it really makes our life a lot easier. And certainly it makes our elected officials' life a lot easier when it comes to making important and strategic decisions. So I'm very appreciative and very thankful of each and everybody in this room. And I've really enjoyed doing that work over the last 5 years and look forward to more success in the future.
Thanks, Justin.
Virginia Stapleton, Ward 1 City Council.
Chris Hoy, I'm the mayor.
Trevor Phillips, Ward 3 City Councilor.
Keith Sealy, City Manager.
And everybody knows me, I'm Courtney, and I have the privilege of holding everybody together. And it's been really, and I get to liaise with the League of Oregon Cities on some of our work together and the mid-sized cities collaboration that we have going to try to get more support for our unsheltered residents. And then Eunice has many hats.
Eunice Kim, Community Development, we typically monitor bills around planning, land use, housing, historic preservation, building safety, things like that. One of my other hats is I'm a member and past chair of the Legislative and Policy Affairs Committee with the Oregon chapter of the American Planning Institute.
Mouthful.
Morning, my name is Ryan Zink, with the Finance and Budget Office. But my primary role here is, major hat is a utility franchise administrator. So under that, and the bills that I watch for, review are anything solid waste related. May also be energy with, could be electric or natural gas. Also broadband and telecom, if there's some bills around there and how that might impact the city. I'm also with the budget and finance, and with Josh not being here today, backup for finance and revenue.
My name is Mark Weinstein. I'm an assistant city attorney here. I believe this is my fourth legislative session that I've been the legal department's representative to this body. The legal department kind of plays a unique role in this process. One, the assistant city attorneys and the city attorney are there to engage in conversations with the various departments in the city. If, as they are reviewing in their expertise a bill, they think, well, there might be broader legal implications or things like that, want to have the dialogue with the legal department, they'll reach out to their assigned assistant city attorney and have that conversation. We also get bills directly assigned to the legal department if it is primarily legal issue, things relating to public records, public meetings, anything that might have ramifications regarding our civil suits and things like that that aren't specifically department related, but have broader citywide implications. We'll review those bills as well. And if necessary, have conversations with our representative respective departments as well.
Great. Morning, Jason Pulley with the Public Works Department. So all things public works, water, wastewater, transportation, also natural resources, from water rights to discharges, fish passage, fish screens, you name it, falls under that umbrella that I'm responsible for. And recently, since the climate action plan was approved, it's the right word, right? Accepted by council. We have the joy of running that program as well. So you'll see some bills on here today that relate to initiatives that we've set out in our climate action plan. So those are also kind of falling under my purview as well.
Here's the Madigan Human Resources. I've been with this for about 16 years and have been a part of this community at multiple different junctures. Here to look at all those human resources.
Great, thank you.
One person that isn't here is, we also have Tiffany Corbett, who's a participant in this meeting as well. And so staff get together regularly to review bills. And we're putting forward for your review and recommendations to full council, a series of bill positions. In some cases this early, we ask that for a broader conversation about some topic areas, just because things aren't quite settling into their lanes just yet. And we want to get more guidance and direction. So Tiffany's not here and she represents all of IT and a little bit of HR and other groups.
Thank you.
Yes.
I got bargaining today with fire, started about half hour ago, and I've got to run over for that, but I wanted to make sure that, and Courtney and I talked, at least being able to meet with the group, so I don't have any bills right now, so. Great.
Thank you.
And then Mike Jaffe, you're here as a guest. Do you want to say anything to the group?
No, I'll just introduce myself. Mike Jassy, I'm the Texas Plan Director of the Atlantic Valley Council.
Thanks for being
Thanks
here.
for being here.
And David Miller from the library is just here in case anything goes off.
Thank you.
Wrong.
Okay, well, let's start down the agenda then to updates and sharing. Justin, looks like you're up.
All right, thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As you can see, we've got quite a full agenda, so I won't waste too much time with the session update. We gave a general overview at our last meeting. It's early in session. Nobody's been together in person in a lot of years. We've got a ton of new legislators and new staff. So it seems very, very frenetic right now, and that's fine. But I want everybody here to know, who's had 1,000 bills plus dumped on them. No need to panic. We've got opportunities every step of the way. We don't have the fastest process as a city in terms of positions and then advocating for those, which is a good thing. It's okay to take a deep breath. There's 2 chambers in there. There's a governor's office. There's opportunities for us to insert ourselves. We also have various interest groups that we are members of and that we collaborate with, as you heard from Jessica and Sarah and Eunice. So we've got tentacles everywhere that we need to have them. And we also really want to focus, as everybody's heard me say a million times, on narrow issues. We've got funding priorities and we've got a few policy priorities. What we don't want to do is get scattered. We want to stay focused on those. So there's a lot of noise going on right now. I know everybody's reading through a lot of bills and there's a lot of activity in the Capitol, but it's okay. Each session, as I talked with the mayor and Keith yesterday, each session has its own feel. You've got to get a sense of it, how it's going to operate, how it's going to work. I would say this, we've got very good relationships with legislative leadership. As everybody knows, that's the way the game gets played. It's the Senate president, it's the Speaker of the House that actually outline the agendas. It's the chairs that actually hear the bills. We've got wonderful relationships there, not just because our mayor was a former representative, not just because people have been involved in the process, but because we do have those relationships. This is really a relationship business. And again, our ability to communicate, collaborate, and cooperate with other governments and with other interests really helps us out when we get to that. So with that, Mr. Mayor, a couple things just to update the group on. We had a wonderful introductory meeting with Senator Patterson yesterday, the city manager and the mayor and I. As we go out and do these things early in session, these are kind of meet and greets. We want to give a little bit of an outline. We've shared our priorities with our Salem delegation, but it's important within the advocacy space not to constantly just be asking for things, right? We need to let people know what we're doing, what we're working on, how that's beneficial to them and their constituents. And as we do that, when we do get later in session and we do have specific asks, it's much better received. So we want to make sure to do that. Had a great meeting there. We're going to continue to meet with Salem delegation for the next month. And then we had a real opportunity and I think a real success with the governor's housing staff, as well as the Senate president, to walk over and do a tour of one of our sheltering facilities. So being on the ground, being close is really a benefit to us. It can also be a little bit of a burden. And the mayor has let people know just because I'm close doesn't mean you can have my time and attention every single second of every single minute during the legislative session. But I think that was great to get those folks on the ground to actually see some success and to see what's going on with that. So those are the 2 things that have happened most recently. As we move on, you guys heard the calendar last week. We do have some bill deadlines coming up. We can still deal with all that stuff. It's not that big of an issue. And again, I'm looking forward to laying this out in the future.
Thanks, Justin. I'll just add to that, we did have I think it's a fairly successful League of Oregon Cities Capital Day on Wednesday. Councilor Stapleton, Councilor Hoy, Councilor Gwynn, myself, I think we were the only one. Councilor Nishioka met with a variety of legislators casually and we're able to talk with folks. We had a nice chance encounter yesterday with the speaker, and so Keith got to meet the Speaker of the House. So that was nice. And so things are, I think, are on their way. I did get a follow-up phone call last night that we'll chat about after the meeting. So just a brief run. So great. Anything else on the session update?
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Awesome. And so item number 3, I will turn it over to Courtney.
Thank you. So we prepare together a series of policy statements that we use, especially in these early days, to help guide our positions on particular bills. And so you might see a tension sometimes between when we're using the policy statements, because it's clean, simple, easy, the direction's clear, and when we might bring a specific bill that has legs or could get traction or could grow in its scope or influence we want to get positioned on a specific bill. So we'll balance both the policy statements and specific bill positions. It gets a little silly, but if you ever have questions, just ask. So the policy statements were approved. I think we did it in July. We try to do it early Because it's better to have that out of the way when we get started and things, the high volume gets going. But we have one recommendation that we'd like to make for a change, and I think it's on page 6. It's on page 6 and it relates to affordable housing. And this is really to sort of, it's a perennial issue that we keep having come up, and we'd like to just lock it into the statements. Jessica, would you give people a little bit of backstory, please?
I would love to, thank you. So a lot of our call outs and our legislative priorities speak to affordable housing development, and they speak to affordable housing supply. And one key thing that we've seen come up this year, and SHA has uniquely been exposed to over the last year and a half, is preservation. So there are projects that are expiring out of their affordability period. We had one recently expire, which was 224 units. We're still working really hard to preserve that, but there's unique bills that are coming out that would help us in our toolbox to make those preservations happen. So my ask to the committee is that we add one line that says, support legislation that seeks to preserve existing affordable housing supply, stabilizing our communities and lowering the negative impact to our most vulnerable community members. And that would cover 2 of the bills that I've brought forth today, where I would be able to just address those rather than bring the bills specifically. And that's my ask on that.
And that's completely consistent with where we've talked about before with the
Orchard Park issue,
Yes.
yeah, we've had a preservation concept in this consistently, so that's but what you're asking us is for this committee to recommend to city council that we make that amendment to our policy statements. Is that the bottom line?
Yes, and there's 2 specific bills that have come up that are one has had a hearing already on the 24th, and one has a hearing on the 30th. And that one for which I would like to testify on behalf of, because it speaks specifically to the Orchard Park situation, as well as we have another 112 units that's facing its affordability expiration this June. So it's a huge priority for our city and for Salem Housing.
I would like to know more about that. We don't need to talk about it now, but afterward, the one that's coming up in the future. I know so much about Orchard Park that I don't need to talk about that anymore. That's so many years. But okay, any thoughts on that? Are you good with that, or you have trouble?
Do you need a motion?
Yeah.
So moved.
All those in favor of the making the recommended amendment to city council, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. So that'll come on our next agenda at city council, correct? Or is that just?
it could, because we have it. I could put that in.
Yeah.
I could watch. Last time, last time the legislative committee came together, we had been making practice to try to be more aggressive by having the meetings on Friday and putting it on the agenda on Monday, and that was becoming too tight for the majority of council. So we're going to try to change our schedule a little bit, but this is great, a bonus for Friday.
Okay,
So then we have a couple housing related bills, and that page of your packet looks like this. So I just want to take a quick minute
is that a number?
I wish, it's right after the legislative policy statements. It looks like this.
It's right after page 7.
So I just want to explain a little bit if you are newer to how we do these things. In the beginning here, when things are a little bit squirrely, we're trying to take ideas to you, not specific bills, but more ideas to flush out a little bit more clearly where the policy statements might not guide specific issues that keep coming up in the session. And so we have a couple of those for you today. And so this is not usually how we present material. What you usually get from us looks more like the bill tracker software system, which will come out like this. So it'll be the specific bill, a bunch of details that are important to refer to, and the position statement that we're recommending. We try to have a position, support, amend, modify, or oppose. And then we try to identify either it's okay if it's just staff, that would be a 2. And if you want it to be everyone up to a counselor or the mayor, it would be a 1. So that's how we are talking about things. Okay, so Jessica, you get to go first on housing.
Okay, great. So first, I just want to highlight landlord tenant issues. What I've noticed in reviewing the bills is that there are a very large amount of landlord tenant bills that have come out, which primarily we would not take a position on because not only are we landlords, but we're also the voucher program. And so we rely on landlords heavily for their participation in our programs. And so most of the time, we try to stay away from those, taking any types of positions. There's only one bill that has come forth and it's been listed as a priority with the Housing Alliance. And there is a possibility with Nicole, our housing administrator, is the president of the Housing Authority of Oregon. And then I am also a member of the Housing Alliance. There is a possibility that we may be asked to take a position on Senate Bill 611. So I've provided Senate Bill 611 and its definition. Essentially, they're calling it the rent reasonableness bill. And that bill has been vetted through all of the work groups at the Housing Alliance and seems to have support and or neutrality on the landlord side. So there's a potential for it to be less controversial, but I'm not sure how that will go. Basically, it just changes some of the existing statutes to firm them up a little bit more in the on the side of the tenants as far as tenant protections. Creating some specific guidelines that further restrict the ability to go above the required rent increase for buildings that are placed in service. It used to be 15 years. Now they want it to be 3 years for the eviction prevention piece. That I don't know if you saw some articles this year where residents were experiencing a 50% increase in their rent, a rent increase that's 50% of what it is. And well, that can happen even with our Senate Bill 608. That can happen because if a building is placed in service less than 15 years ago, a landlord has that option. So this would further restrict that to 3 years. So there's that. And then there's also for the landlord caused eviction. So what you'll hear is landlord's termination without cause. And so essentially there's some caveats in the landlord tenant law that allow for that to happen. And right now the amount that a resident would get as far as reimbursement would be 1 month's rent. And they want to expand that to 3 months because of the just lack of housing in the market overall to give people a greater chance of being able to procure housing in that time frame. And so because of its being listed as a priority, it's going to be advocated heavily by Housing Alliance and some of the other groups. And so the question would be, is this something that you would want us to take a position on? And how do you feel about that? So I recommend it as a support priority too. We won't take a position on it unless we're absolutely forced to. And then at that point, we might, show our support, but I leave that to the council to decide. The other bills that I brought forth today, 2 of them are preservation related. House Bill 3042 is the one I would like to testify on Tuesday. This is such a critical bill in the preservation of our existing affordable housing stock. We have personal experience in dealing with it with Orchard Park. We're still in a fight for Orchard Park, trying to save it. There's still no certainty that we'll be successful, but we're fighting for it. And then this next one coming up in June, had these protections in this bill been available to us, we could have protected the tenants, given them a 3-year window. These tenants don't even know what's happening. And so we want to fight for that tenant voice to make it a requirement in statute that they're notified that this project is leaving its affordability. It doesn't change the ability of the landlord to still sell it at market, but it gives us this large window to work with these tenants and try to help get them other housing. I mean, there's just, our waiting lists are so long, there's no way we can help them right now. But with this passing, we have this ability to do so. So I'd like to advocate for that one. And for the expanding of the affordable housing development, House Bill 2761, and then there's a secondary landlord concept 554 that's in process right now, which mirrors this legislation, allows for what the city wants, which is mixed income developments. And it allows us to be able to procure funding for projects that have an affordability piece at a percentage. And it's huge for us. This is a game changer. And so for these 2 concepts, we would like the ability to be able to support them in testimony before.
I want to break them down.
Okay,
There was a lot.
sorry.
So let's go back to 611.
Yes.
And I didn't bring my laptop, I apologize, or I would look this up, but whose bill is 611? It's important information.
Yes.
for me to know.
Senate Bill 611 is right here.
Chachi, Gamba, Hudson, Plain, Neron.
Okay,
Valderrama, Campos, Denbro. Elsewhere.
I thought I heard bipartisan.
Yeah, mostly
I didn't hear any.
I can't. see well.
Okay, I'm like, I didn't hear any of the, I heard the partisan part, I didn't hear the bipartisan part.
Mostly. Kings.
That's okay. All right, cool. But who's the chief sponsor? Is it Denbro?
No, it's.
The way the bill tracker lists these out, these are listed as the sponsors. It doesn't designate the chief.
You guys have questions or thoughts on 611? This is the one that I didn't, so basically, right now, if a bill is 15 years old or more or less, then you're subject to certain limits.
You're not subject to
You're
certain.
not subject to limits. And then once it hits that time frame, you are. And what you're proposing, or this bill proposes, is that would change to 3. You would have no limits for 3 years. Okay, so it just shortens it.
So the reason they did the 15-year thing was to not stifle new development.
That's right, and because of the tax credit window, they have an investor in that first 15 years, and potentially they could get off track on their pro forma and would have to then they wouldn't have the ability to write the financing on the building. So this definitely comes as it would be something that you'd have to preempt and have really good asset management strategies in place to try to correct anything within that first 3 years. But as a housing authority, we don't go above that amount anyways. We're very mission driven, so our affordable housing developments, we just follow that guideline. But the sense is if it's a for-profit developer, a lot of times they're not doing that. And so there have been instances in the recent past that have been publicized where those within that first 15-year window have gone above that amount and sometimes up to 50%, and they're right. So any affordable housing development has to get the approval from Oregon Housing and Community Services to do that, which goes through a level of scrutiny. So it really is about those for-profit. And it makes it difficult for any of the projects with our voucher tenants when they're going above such a high amount. It could potentially push our voucher out of there.
And there's 5 chief sponsors to that one. That's probably why it was confusing on there. I just pulled it up. So Campos, Valderrama, Neron, Senator, I can't even pronounce this last name, and I'm gonna butcher it. Bluin? Yeah. Yes, and Gamba are all chief sponsors.
Majority.
Denbro is a regular sponsor.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, Justin, before we?
No, this majority, these would be good bills to work on if we've got insight and the ability to testify. I think it'd be wise.
I'm very favorable.
Okay.
I mean, I guess what I'm hearing though, I want to clarify this part if I can. With the position 2 priorities, staff would be the ones that advocate for it, but I thought I was hearing or gathering that there'd be some reluctant, like we don't actually want to make our support.
We wouldn't become like a front runner in the support. We wouldn't lead the support. But if our housing authority partners say, hey, Salem Housing Authority, we want you to take a position on this and unify with us, we would want to go ahead and take that position.
So,
If we were to say support 1, we're going all in.
Yeah,
but I think too, what might be confusing, Jessica, is that you're so good at advocating for SHA and the city that sometimes those lines might bleed.
Yes.
So this is actually requesting the city council approve support of the bill. And that would mean that we, the city, and the city of Salem letterhead.
Right.
Could testify. So, and show up with our, city, not SHA, right?
Sorry.
So that's where
My
it's kind of,
Yeah.
it might be confusing. You're right to hear that.
okay,
SHA would be more concerned about being a front runner, but the city
yeah.
could do it easily.
Do we need to vote on this or just say?
Head nod is fine for us.
Okay.
I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
Oh, I'm good with it.
Okay,
yeah.
then I'm likewise.
Yeah.
2 times.
2.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll stay with a staff level of support.
And
Excellent.
that if that somehow you need something other than that, come back to us.
Okay, great. Do you want to take the next one then?
Yeah, so 2761, to me, this seems like a no-brainer. Whose bill is this?
It's
Crow.
I got 'em.
Noose or no?
Nose.
Sorry,
Nose.
Nose. But there's a legislative concept, because I was at a Housing Alliance meeting yesterday. There's a legislative concept 554, which is actually being drafted by Oregon Housing and Community Services, which I assume has been asked for by potentially the majority or the governor, because maybe there were some languages in this House bill that wasn't exact, or I'm not sure exactly why, because I brought it up, but they were hush hush about why there was going to be two bills like this. So I think the one that's coming up might replace this one, but it's the same premise. And we would love to have the ability to access funding from OHCS for mixed income development that meets the city.
Basically, it just, as I read it, it expands the use of low-income housing tax credits to mixed-use buildings rather than just strictly residential.
Right.
And that is 100% consistent with where we're headed as a city.
And mixed income, all the way up to 120.
So, yeah, my only thought on this is, do we want to go one rather than two? Because this is,
Yeah, either way, I want to make sure I bring forth the bill that is still in concept because it's being reviewed by DOJ right now. And I can bring that forth when.
We can
when
talk
need
about
be.
that in
But
the
if there's a hearing on 2761, I'm hoping to be able to provide support of that as well.
are you doing that?
Yeah, I agree with you. At least a two,
Yeah.
and very willing to go to one if and when needed
Yeah.
or beneficial.
Yep, we're in sync.
We
Okay,
agree.
let's just do one so it's easier later.
One, and you can always two comes with one.
Yeah, let's
automatically.
go all in.
Okay, and then the other one was 3042,
Huge.
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 Yeah.
I mean-
For me, I'm the same.
Advocating for this immediately. The hearing is 8 o'clock on the 30th. I would like to be there as a front runner.
Yeah.
With a network of affordable housing, who's the sponsor and brought this forward to the Housing Alliance. The Housing Alliance have endorsed it. Housing Authority of Oregon have endorsed it. This is huge. This could have helped us with Orchard Park and could have helped us with this one that's upcoming. And really needs to be a focus.
I've spent so many hours on this issue with Director Bell and others that, yes, this is really important. To help keep affordability affordable. Affordable units. You good?
Yeah.
Great. What's next?
Do you want to address 2653 or are you gonna?
2653 is just another one of those brought forth by NOAA. It already had one hearing, but if it's approved, I will testify for it as well when it continues through its process. And this one is just adding another tool to the toolbox in providing property owners who sell it to an affordable buyer, they would be able to take some type of tax deduction or a tax credit if they sell it to someone who retains it as affordable housing. So it's incentivizing.
I need all the tools.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm a 2 or a 1, either one is fine.
Put them on this one.
That's
for
fine.
ease. And then Eunice has a couple that I forgot to put on the list in your packet.
Okay.
And they are both House bills. Eunice?
Great. So the first one's House Bill 2889. It establishes the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. That's a bill that the Department of Land Conservation Development have been working on for years. To put this forward as essentially a new way of allocating and establishing our housing needs. For housing needs, the governor's executive order on housing and homelessness referenced this Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and the 36,000 units we need per year. And so what this means at the local level is that the state would actually be allocating to us what our housing need is and what we need to build in the future over 20 years. It accounts for underproduction, homelessness, and would break things down by income. So it's different than how we really previously projected our housing needs. And then we would get targets every 8 years. So I think it's a priority of Department of Land Conservation Development. The governor has referenced it. So I just wanted to see if you wanted to monitor it or kind of where you wanted to go on that one.
Would you articulate the downside of it?
The downside of it is that I anticipate that our allocation for housing will be much bigger than in the past, because again, it's accounting for things that we haven't considered in the past. So it's not just based on population projection. It's going to look at our homelessness, our underproduction, our years of not producing enough housing. So
That's not the downside.
I'm not saying it's a downside,
Okay, I'm like, that didn't sound like.
but it will increase our need and what we need to plan for.
And this is one of those times where being told, sometimes we get anxious about being told. what
That
to
was
do.
my
So-
red flag. It was like, wait a minute, what?
That's.
We're gonna be
that's-
told?
Um,
So how are others to be?
That's the downside.
I totally understand what the downside of being told that something is bad, but remind me. Well, I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So basically, yeah, can you
Dictate.
try to get
They're
it
gonna give us a number essentially.
They're gonna
instead of
give
us doing our own.
And deciding where we think it best fits in our community according to our system and some of the other base work we've done in our community. Talk about where we want to put density housing.
So less local input and more dictated to us.
It sounds like, but so I'm still struggling.
How would this relate to the housing production strategy that we're contemplating?
So this will be
Forward?
in place until a few years. So there's gonna be rulemaking that happens, and then the state needs to do its actual analysis, and then the allocation of housing. So our housing production strategy will move forward on producing the housing that we based on our Salem and the work that we've previously done. But in the future, when we get that new allocation, we'll have to do a housing production strategy that meets those likely larger numbers.
You break those line. Somehow.
Do we know if the league has a position on this?
They're gonna be meeting about it after this meeting, so I'll listen.
We're bringing to you this question because it's one where our knee jerk is always, don't tell us how to be.
Right.
But in this particular issue, we have a vested interest in having housing. And so we're bringing to you the hard ones.
Is there a time sensitive nature of this?
I don't know. We'll know more after we hear from the league.
I would prefer
Get
to
a
hold off
sense.
Okay.
until we hear from the league, because I'm a little bit fuzzy still. If that works for you guys, I would just be interested to hear more ideas on it and thoughts.
So we monitor.
We monitor it for right now, but we're open to talking about it at our next meeting. Does that work?
And
Who's
another
this? sponsor?
Well, it's a bunch of
list.
The list.
very smart people that
Okay.
are usually aligned with our priorities in town. So it seems like a good idea, but I'm so far not convinced.
Okay.
Yes, but it's very important. I mean, I think Courtney's caution is one that we always see. We don't want to, you guys don't want to be handcuffed with
Right.
specific mandates
Right.
that don't give us the ability to move and react to our own community, right? And if that's a statewide mandate, then that gets to be a little difficult
Right.
for you guys
That's
to
what I want to
operate
understand a
underneath.
little bit better.
So we always want to be clear on mandates, especially ones that aren't funded, and then especially ones that tie your guys' hands.
Right.
And also there's a bit of strategy. If the league is going to be really active in this, we may not wish to.
Right.
There's a lot of conversations
Yeah.
to be had.
I would
just
like
wanted
to,
you to know that
Thank
this is
you.
going on and it's challenging for us to give you clear suggestion.
thank you. No, this will be good. I think we can keep our powder dry for now. And then
There's one more unit.
explore in the future.
2984.
Sorry, I thought you-
Yeah, House Bill 2984 is another tension one where it's preemption of our local land use authority, but would support more affordable housing. This would essentially allow for any commercial building to be converted without a zone change conditional use to workforce housing, so the 120% of area median income. So it's against what we did for our code amendment to say you can't do all multifamily housing, for example, in our commercial zones. But if you remember that code amendment last year, we already implemented the previous bill that said affordable housing up to 80% is essentially allowed everywhere now in the city. This would extend it to 120%, so a higher income folks, and it's only building conversions, commercial.
What's the downside?
So we had passed a code amendment that said we couldn't do multifamily standalone in our commercial industrial zones anymore, right? It's only allowed as part of mixed use. We're trying to preserve our employment land for employment. That's the only downside, and it's a preemption, like we couldn't say you have to do zone change conditional use. It's just allowed effort.
So it allows for more housing and more zones.
Workforce housing.
It takes our ability to deny it away.
And the SDCs, so.
Oh, there's
Might
no
have
way
a
to-
financial impact.
Yeah.
That's the downside.
That's the downside, yeah.
So no STCs?
Yeah, up
For
to 120, so to expand.
Versus the current program.
Which is 80.
80%. And it's for 15 years. So when the affordability expires, as
Because we currently waive SDCs for anything up to the 80% of the new family income. And this was.
Tied to the years of affordability. Yeah, versus just a blanket 15.
Okay.
We've all gotten very versed with each other on that one.
I know, I
It's very fiscal
had a
impact. Yeah.
texting conversation with Faith
That-
about this.
Yeah, and that's thrown in just at the end of the bill,
Yes.
so it would, I mean, it's easily,
Indeed.
that's a easy one to work with if we like the bill but don't like the SDC.
Yeah.
And the league is tracking this one. I anticipate they're going to discuss.
Can we put this on the same track with 2889? That would be, and let us revisit it when we hear a little bit more. That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
That was just a perfect example of why this group is so awesome.
Yeah, because you get a lot more.
Yeah.
Detail that
And
isn't always obvious.
And there are so many different perspectives to so many of these sticky issues, which is why we bring them to you.
Yeah.
And why we have such fascinating debate.
Great. On to the next ones.
Climate impact. Now, these two bills are in your packet. Oh, do you want to talk about CPAC first?
Yes,
This one isn't really a number, is it?
there's two numbers.
488.
It's House Bill 2659 and Senate Bill 580. They're the CFAC bills, climate friendly and equitable communities. So if you remember last year, the Land Conservation Development Commission passed new rules to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. It's stuff that we're working on already.
You need to say the numbers again because
Yeah.
they're not on the packet.
2659 and 580.
Yes.
They're here, they're just not
They're-
folded.
yeah, they're under.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Climate
Okay.
friendly.
And you know how to mark.
Oh, yeah.
That's perfect.
I'm a bill tracker pro.
So
There for years.
this bill would require the Land Conservation Development Commission to go back and amend or replace the rules that were adopted to give essentially more flexibility to local communities. And essentially, that there's a catch that says they couldn't actually adopt the new rules or replace rules unless 80% of the impact of local governments supported it. So this is another avenue. So we didn't take a position on an appeal of those state rules, but this is an avenue through the legislature that subsidies.
Okay, so what I think I just heard you say is the recently adopted CPAC rules that several of our colleague cities are currently suing the state over, and we chose not to join because we're actually already doing that work. This would undo some of that work and make it so essentially 21% of the local governments decided against it, they could veto. Is that right? Yeah. I mean, just, it's interesting looking at the sponsors. It's a fascinating, fascinating, career. I can explain that some other time. But, so, what's your recommendation?
I was gonna monitor this one because we didn't take a position on the appeal. And I didn't know if we wanted to go straight against LOC, other partners.
I would say at this point, my thought is to monitor it. That's to keep our powder dry, but definitely this is a horrible bill. I mean,
So this is a priority of the League of Oregon.
so so keep in mind who makes up the League of Oregon Cities.
No, I get it.
Mostly very small towns.
Yeah.
And so sometimes their positions are from a different perspective than ours is. It's a larger city. So.
Well, that's what I was thinking about with that other one that would tell folks, the state would tell folks where, I was like, that could be helpful for our friends.
Correct.
Right, but
So, but I think monitoring this bill is a really good course for them.
But a phobia.
Well, personally, I probably hate this.
Personally,
I'm offended I had to read this. Sorry.
Yeah, strongly neutral.
Strongly neutral.
Strongly neutral.
Strongly neutral.
Here's what we hate about it.
So we'll monitor.
Aggressively neutral.
We have a couple more on this same sheet related to climate, and these are about the REACH code, and I think Jason, you were going to.
Yeah, and these, I mean, we know what the focus of this session is, and so, these aren't really priority bills, but I wanted to bring them up because, just to get a conversation going about how we want to address these things that go with or against some climate action. Right,
And this is sponsored by the same crew that sponsored the last one. It's basically the same ideas undermining some of the state regulations.
and so a lot of it has to do with local control, right? I mean, you don't want state telling you you can or can't.
Sure.
And so the natural gas bills were just an example, right? We've got one that says, you can't ban it, and then another one that says, look, you can have local control to make your own decisions about it. The same goes with the REACH code, right? The REACH code is a set of building standards that were adopted last year for energy efficiency, things like that. And the bill basically would say, you as a local, a local jurisdiction that has a responsibility for building inspections, you cannot set standards that go higher than what the REACH code already does. Again, it's a local control issue, but it all falls under this idea of what we want to do under our climate action. So I'm just kind of wanting to get a sense, we don't need to take a position on these bills because they're not going to go anywhere, but how does the council want to address things that are for or against the climate action?
Generally, we want to further our interests, which is furthering things that help us implement our climate action plan. So in general. But we also want to keep our powder dry until we need to use it. So, and this seems like one of those cases.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, these are not priority. They're just they're a conversation starter.
Yeah.
And the cap and trade days are gone, so we don't have to worry about that kind of stuff right now.
The other thing that this conversation is good for is it helps Justin to know where we are at, things and how to approach stuff. So,
And it,
yeah.
and a lot of it is a basic position. Can't take away local control. So
Right. Sometimes that's an easy offering. So I think to me, this one goes, let's say with our last one. Yeah, we just continue to monitor it. So,
And you can see it's not.
right, it's the same crowd.
yeah, exactly. That's right. This thing has no teeth, but it's just right.
Okay, and then we have two that we supplied in your packet, the text of the bills regarding medical waste incineration, Senate Bill 488, and the study of the emissions impact. And Ryan's going to take these, Senate Bill 494. And again, the text is in your packet.
Yeah, so wasn't planning on bringing these to you yet because I'm still working with Marion County and some other folks on getting their position, but council received an email from Salem 350 Sunday evening, so I wanted to at least bring it to your attention and kind of start the conversation on that. Senate Bill 488 would essentially tie municipal solid waste incinerators, which there's only one of in the state of Oregon, so that's Covanta and Brooks, that currently receives medical waste as defined by federal code. So they do burn that medical waste there. What Senate Bill 488 would do is tie the emissions standards of Covanta, so long as it's burning at least, I think, 200 pounds per hour on an annual average of medical waste, to the emission standards of federally defined medical waste incinerators, which Covanta is a solid waste, municipal solid waste incinerator, not a medical waste strictly incinerator. There's a OHSU has a medical waste incinerator, for example. So a couple of things, Covanta does not currently meet those standards. It meets the standards, both federal and DEQ standards for a municipal solid waste, which they're allowed to do some medical waste as well. There was an article heading about there being some loophole. I don't understand that loophole. I haven't looked into that, why they think that's a loophole per se. But if medical waste was not allowed to be burned, so that the negative side for Salem is if that was not allowed, the revenue source from that would go away. And then that would impact disposal rates and then ultimately our customer rates for solid waste here in Salem and Marion County.
Because we have the flow control law in place.
Because of flow control, but also simply the capacity of the places that we have available to us to dispose. I can go into some of that if you really want to.
Probably we need to talk about that at another forum. I don't know if we have time to get into that here. But I am still trying to really understand the new relationship between the county and Covanta and how that impacts us. Because, they've changed their relationship with Covanta.
Right.
And I don't completely yet understand the structure and why and how that. It seems like we kept everything in place in terms of flow control and all of those things, but yet they've fundamentally changed their relationship. So I'm not sure that our system makes sense anymore.
So there used to be a lot of revenue and cost sharing between Marion County and Covanta.
Right.
That has all been stripped out and it's strictly county pays X number of dollars for each ton.
Right, so now it's
And then-
more like a free market, except that we are required to go there.
Yes, Marion County directs that flow, which
Right.
currently,
We're one out of 36 counties that has our trash restricted by the county commissioners.
sure.
So
So-
in the policy agenda, we had talked about returning to sort of a solid waste, a broader solid waste policy discussion. Is
Yeah.
that something that where this kind of relationship and all of the details around this could be explored further?
I think it would be
Or-
helpful to understand the new relationship between the county, Covanta, and how that impacts us. I think for sure, because the whole landscape has changed.
Mhm.
I think that would be really a helpful conversation. And again, not have time here for sure.
So at this point, I'm recommending certainly that we monitor this.
Yeah, I
and
think
come
monitoring
back
it
with
right
more
now.
information as we have it.
Yeah.
Senate Bill
Well,
490.
hold on, I just want to make sure my colleague.
I'm there with you.
Yeah, Deb, Senator Patterson texted me about this. We haven't had a chance to talk. I mean, I think it adds a bit more monitoring requirements to Covanta. Okay. So yeah, definitely monitor.
Yep.
Thank you.
So
One more.
Senate Bill 494, again, is directed towards municipal solid waste, which, this is simply, it's a study bill of studying the emissions, impact in the quote unquote surrounding area of the burner, of the incinerator. Just a couple of concerns, I don't, from a staff perspective, I don't, not approved, anyway, sorry, the negatives is there's no funding, listed, so it looks like this, so not sure if this is DEQ needs to fund it. It's directed towards DEQ to do the study, but there's no funding associated with it. And then again, that study area is vague, it says just in the area around, it's not 1 mile, 2 miles, so it seems to be very subjective. And it is a study bill at this point, so there could be additional things added to it. So again, I would recommend monitoring, not opposing necessarily or supporting, but certainly monitoring at this point.
I'm definitely okay with monitoring. I would definitely not be okay with opposing. I support this concept. It
Right.
needs some.
Absolutely.
Generally, I mean, I hear about being, the former counselor from Salem. I hear about this issue all the time and how it has disparate impacts on the only majority minority board. So it's an area that's near and dear to my heart. So I would like to know more about this as a district.
I agree. Well said.
Excellent. So, so we'll keep a close eye on that and maybe look later at opportunities to amend it so that it gets what we want out of it. Okay. Then we have, for something totally different, we're gonna pivot to public records and public meetings. Just really quick, there's a lot of bills about that. So
Yay.
Mark is gonna give us a quick.
I know you got your agenda. You were hoped that this would have been accelerated up the agenda. because
Totally.
Nothing more stimulating
Public
than a
meetings.
discussion
public
about
record.
public records, public meetings law. Let's start on the public record side. Every legislative session, we get a slew of bills designed to tweak our public records law. Be it a range of things from what would be exempt from disclosure or not exempt to the fees. Under the current structure of the public records law, public bodies like Salem, their fees for processing public records requests has to be tied to the actual costs of fulfilling those requests with some discretion to waive or reduce those fees in the public interest. This legislative session, and we have policy statements, I believe, that covers bills that are out there that start chipping away at that cost recovery or make more expansive what must be disclosed and is no longer exempt from disclosure. We're seeing a whole slew of bills, I think 3 bills that are chipping away at the fee structure, mandating certain fee waivers, as opposed to it being in the city's discretion with then a process for review. Our review goes through the DA's office. And then a lot of mandatory fee waivers or a presumption that a fee waiver should be given if it's a media has requested it. And as you're all aware, we get a lot of media public records requests. So just as a general policy question, I wanted to know if the council wants to be more actively involved in those or monitor it, work with Justin to see what's moving forward and handle that on the staff level under our policy policy statements.
My thoughts are, and this is just a bad from colleagues, but I don't want to spend a ton of our resources working on the details. If there's a bill that's getting ready to move or something that we need to take an interest in, that you think that impacts us, then talk to us.
Sure.
But otherwise, I'd rather not take the lead or have any sort of leading voice on public records. I don't know if you have any different thoughts. Or are you okay with that?
Monitor if needed.
Yeah.
So shift to the other side, public meetings. We don't have any policy statements per se. Usually we monitor them, look at them. There's a couple bills right now, and I'll work with Justin and his team, all here. We'll look at them.
Really, it's Nicole and her team.
Usually it's bills that do either try and remove what can be done in executive session or what can be added to executive session. There's one bill that's out there right now that wants to take labor negotiations out of possibly going into executive session, which, looking at your faces, would be something I think that you want to take a position on if it moves forward. So we'll monitor that, and if it starts queuing up and moving forward, I'll come back on that one.
Yeah, because it would fundamentally impact our ability to negotiate a contract in a fair way and in an appropriate way and a fiscally responsible way. I have problems with that.
Then slightly different than specifically what's exempt or not. There's another bill that's out there that implements the serial meetings laws that have largely been done through judicial decisions where certain conversations that are occurring through either telephone or more commonly emails can turn into a public meeting if it includes enough decision makers and they're discussing the substance of a decision they have to make or sort of discussing what their decision would make, which is positive. But in that same bill, there's a requirement that a person can file a complaint against a public body to the public body saying, here's how we feel you violated the public records law, and then require an affirmative statement from the public body saying, no, we didn't, and here's why, or yes, we agree with you that we did, and here's what we're doing to remediate that situation. And then depending can go on to the Oregon Ethics Commission. We've got some concerns about requiring a public body to make an affirmative statement that they feel that they violated the law. Monitor that as well.
I guess my thought on it is I'm totally fine codifying the current case law into law, the current
Right.
rule, that's fine. Because those are the rules we play by, but I'm not comfortable with them expanding to what you're suggesting. We'd be spending all of our time trying to prove a negative.
Absolutely.
Like, no, I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. And that was our feeling as well, as supporting the portions that were codifying the law, seeking amendments to strip that other out. I don't know where it's at. Let me work with our team, see if that's moving forward. And if we do feel that that's a bill that's going to move forward and has some legs, I'll bring it back for a specific position for ratification in our next meeting. Is that
I want to check in.
Yeah, and right now, folks would make a complaint to the Ethics Commission, and then they would do an
Okay.
investigation, right?
right?
And then what you're saying is that, with this move, they could come to public comment at a meeting and accuse us of something, and then we would need to defend ourselves
In writing.
in writing,
Yep.
or it goes to the court.
It will actually require the city to have a process for accepting complaints that we violated the law, and the law spells out that you have to do it within this period of time. You start with the city, you specify how they feel that the complainant needs to specify how they feel that the city has violated the public meetings law, be it a serial communication or improper notice or something along those lines. And then the city would have to respond to that in writing within a certain period of time.
Yeah, the challenge for me with all of this is, that's all well and good, the city, but when ethics complaints come down, they don't come against the city.
Right.
They come against individual elected officials.
Right.
And so I don't want to have to be a part of the city process to go ahead and put some sort of admission on the record and then have to go defend myself in front of the ethics commission. That doesn't make any sense.
So as this advances, we'll bring it back if it has like.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
that's a very strange concept. I mean, I agree with the idea of keeping public meetings public and all of that, but this seems silly.
Do you want me to bring to its voting now or?
No, let's take a break on those topics.
I wanted to do a time check with you. I know we're at noon and I want to honor time, but I know we have a bunch of stuff to go through, Courtney. So what?
I think everybody here is in.
Except for me, I have to take off.
Jason.
Sorry, I'm.
Do we have any?
No,
do
he's
you have
all right.
anything?
He can go.
Great. All right.
Okay,
Jason,
I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yes, everybody.
So. Go. Okay, so Trevin, let's do yours really quick.
Okay.
We have some firearms things we just want to test to see where you want to go with, if you want to go anywhere, and then we have a couple things that are coming back that are important for you guys to be aware of. So.
Great. Yeah, broadly speaking, firearms, I think there's, I'm looking at 8 of them. 2 are just kind of, clarifying on undetectable firearms, so ones that are built through 3D printer, things of that nature, that we're actually seeing quite a bit on the streets. And then the other ones are around concealed carry, both in public buildings or public facilities, and then others going all the way to the state constitutional carry type state. So the ones that kind of really looking at are the ones regarding the ability to adopt a policy ordinance restricting concealed carry on public buildings. So that could have potentially affect us if we decide to do that. There's 2 of those that I think are going hand in hand, and then the other ones are trying to repeal that again moving forward. So just kind of looking at, we monitor, we look at, we want to weigh in on any of that. That's a pretty delicate area.
It's a broad question.
Yeah, sorry.
That
There's just no policy guidance within the statements as is. But I'm seeing that as a hot button topic that will keep moving forward. So
So the question is whether you want us to be bringing firearms proposals before you, or whether we just want to let it rest. Let
Well,
others.
I certainly want to know about bills that impact our decision-making authority. You know, with like, can we restrict a firearm here, there, or elsewhere? I want to know about that. I want to be able to weigh in. Beyond that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to have some control over city hall.
I'm with you.
Yeah, council chamber.
Like no weapons in there would be great.
So but beyond, what about in terms of like his other question about, say, ghost guns, things you can print on a 3D printer? Do we want to weigh in on those kinds of gun issues, or would we rather just not?
Personally, I'm opposed to ghost guns.
I know, I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, but as the city of Salem, I think it could be a bit controversial, but like I'm not okay personally with becoming a constitutional carry.
We do have other organizations that will likely monitor these things and take the lead on it, and then we would not have to do that. So that might be a strategy we want to employ.
And I both Trevin and counselors and mayor, I mean, and I work with Kevin Campbell and Jason Myers, so we can definitely get a sense of, in conversations with them, what's going on, and do we need to insert ourselves here or there? I mean, I think we can be strategic.
Yeah, and I think that's what I heard from my colleagues, is we want to be strategic when we have a direct interest, and others will want to know if our voice is needed, and then we'll consider it at that time.
keep an eye on, and then, yeah, because the 2 for the public buildings, or Senate Bill 686 and then House Bill 207. Those 2 provide more authority to restrict access.
At the risk of extending this a bit,
is public restricting things at a public place like City Hall, is that part of like the ability to restrict things in sensitive areas? And is it different than hospitals? Or are they kind of lumped in together?
It's authorizes governing bodies of certain public entities that own or control public buildings. So it doesn't have anything to do with hospitals.
That's a different concept. That's probably the sensitive. Okay.
So this, if I can amplify the conversation briefly, just so we're all on the same page. Right now, we are preempted from restricting under
Right.
state law unless we are specifically granted that authority. So as I'm hearing it, these bills are actually expanding our ability to restrict, not narrowing that even.
I
Yeah,
really
right.
like that.
And there's a couple that go the opposite,
Yeah,
way, but
yeah.
two right now are introduced to enhance our.
Yeah, we want to have our ability to restrict firearms since the legislature hasn't been to be courageous. So
I mean, I've watched TV enhance.
So, I mean, I think our community would really go behind this as well.
I agree.
Yeah, and so I guess my question is. Do we stay neutral? I mean, I
No, no,
feel like
no,
we're
not
neutral.
not on these, not on the ones that change our authority.
Okay,
No, those are the ones specifically I think we need to be involved with. It's all the other stuff that we're not gonna take an active stance, but if it's about our ability to restrict firearms in our building, then I think we need to weigh in.
And surrounding grounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not just on.
Right.
In the building proper.
So
Right.
this is exactly the conversation that I was hoping we would have, and I think this gives us a lot of clarity about what to bring forward to you in the
Great.
future. The primary question then, Trevin, you said Senate Bill 686 and House Bill 207 would expand our ability to create those kinds of.
What's the House bill? It's gotta have another number.
It's gotta be a higher number than that.
Two-
That's our
Maybe there-
2027?
2007.
Oh, I'm
2000.
sorry. Heard the second.
and then the Senate bill.
686. See, I just looked up 686. It looks like a bill that, based on our conversation that we would support. And looks like the 2007 is the same bill, but in the House. And to me, it seems like, yeah, it's our grounds and our buildings.
So we
We would
can
want to.
tailor the position statement to craft this, to describe this conversation
Yeah.
where you've all landed.
Yeah.
And we can put that on the agenda for the 13th if you'd like.
So we're basically
Wait.
giving it a 2 at this point? Or a 1?
I would like to give these a 1 personally.
I agree. Like, I want to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
those
fine.
concepts, yeah, because this is
I mean, at
about,
least a 2. if not a
it's
1.
about local control, but it's also about just safety. So, yeah, to me, this is a 1.
Great. That is the perfect right result of this conversation. Thank you for playing.
Yeah.
We have, do you want to talk about the new crime, new traffic violations, and specifically the photo radar? This is the photo radar we've been seeking
Yeah.
forever.
I mean, what, can we give it a higher than a 1?
Good, I was worried, I was making a mistake, I was like, support one, I was like, wait, hold on. So.
Oh, yeah, no, we're support 1 all the way on 2095. I feel confident my colleagues will agree because we've been talking about this and trying forever.
Yeah.
Basically, it just takes out all the specific cities and lets anybody do it as long as you follow the rules.
And I believe there is another portion in there where we would have more local control of reducing speed limits on certain streets.
We did get that last time, but we found out last night that it's a.
We have to get like
Maps.
pre-approved to
Yeah.
be able to use that authority, and the pre-approval process is by.
So I would love to
State.
hear more about that bill that you're talking about, that you're referencing, because anything that streamlines the process to lower the speed limits. I would love to.
I'll have to see that because I think it's just an addition to this bill. It's in this bill that would enhance, but I don't know off the top of my head.
2295?
Yeah, 2095, it's way down in it.
Oh, okay,
As
so
a-
I must not have gone far enough because I
Did you say
yeah.
2095 or 2295?
2095, so
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
2095. Yeah, it's further in there. That's where I think it is by between 5 to 10 miles an hour and up to 20 miles an hour.
Great,
Cool.
with no convoluted process.
That I'm not sure about. I will
Okay,
dig further on
Because
that.
right now the process is
Yeah.
very convoluted.
we'd like volunteers to go out there. What about the signs? That'd be great.
Do you want to address the other bigger, or wait, on crime and other traffic stuff? No, wait, just photo, yeah, let's focus on photo radar.
Well, I think that one is done, and I'll take a look to find out more information on the regarding the speed.
The part about the speed is the city may establish by ordinance a designated speed for a highway under the jurisdiction of the city that is up to 10 miles per hour lower than the statutory speed, so long as the designated speed is not less than 2 miles per hour. Yes, yeah, we love this bill.
So we just change over SRC to reduce speed limits within the city.
Okay, now we're gonna play lightning round.
Okay, go.
The lightning round is behavioral health and mobile crisis. I just sampled the bills that have potential legs, given the sponsorship. The 5 before you are, on the last page of your packet, I believe. House Bill 2152 is, an OHA study about access to behavioral health treatment. We think that that's, I
We have to study it to figure out that it's broken.
think it's important that they take some movement.
It's broken.
House Bill 2757 is about expanding the coordinated crisis service, including 988. House Bill 2918,
So 2152 is actually requires Oregon Department of Emergency Management to study emergency management.
what? 2152?
I don't have that number on it.
Is it 2512? Sometimes this happens.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll get it.
It's okay.
Um,
Yes, it's 2512.
I do that all the time. I'm really,
Requires Oregon Health Authority to study access to behavioral health care.
thank you.
And that
Never
is,
done that before.
we've done it 1,000 times. That's the problem. All we ever do is study it. We never actually fix it.
It's, the sponsorship suggests that it could take off. And so it
Doesn't say who it's going to say that.
I think if we looked at the bill. it would be
Bill?
a committee bill.
It's a committee bill,
Yeah.
but at the request of Rob knows. So yeah, this is a good one. Let's support it.
just staff level.
Probably.
Thank you. And then 2757 is, that's the one about expanding crisis service access, including 988.
What it does is it changes the funding mechanism to help better fund these, and this is the one that I was asked to testify on. I would love to be able to say that I'm doing it on the city's behalf.
I think it has a nexus with our policy statements already.
Yeah,
I just thought if you wanted, we could specifically address this bill in coming.
are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, we're good.
Great.
And then
Be
two,
testifying on the 6th.
House Bill 2918. This is about expanding or continuing the pilot program about mobile health units. So it's continuing the funding mechanism and the grants to do that, which I think we're supportive of. And the next one is Senate Bill 496, which is about expanding funding so that people with pets can get support to move into all of our sheltering programs. Right now, you can't get any funding for support with that.
Is
Heck
it to help people with pets or pets?
It's to help people with pets
They're
who might
excluded.
need funding for dog food or funding for vet care,
Oh, so it's to
it's
help
all-
pets of folks who are on shelter.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was
Help-
trying to figure that out.
Senator Wagner's one of the co-sponsors. That's probably got a good chance.
Yeah, what was the number? 80% come through those.
Yeah.
Shelters with pets.
Priority 2.
1 or
You
2,
choose.
Yeah.
I would say 1.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Because what it is, I mean, if you think about it in a bigger context, it's removing barriers for folks. And that's
Yeah,
what we-
I got the removing barriers, but I was a little bit confused, like, it also dedicates funds to help care for pets.
It amends allowable purposes of the emergency housing account to include account monies to be used for grants to assist vets and individuals.
So they can buy dog food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now.
I mean, I'm fine with
Can't
removing barriers, but that's just,
support.
yeah,
You can't use that funding source to
I'll
support.
defer to my experienced colleagues and we'll go with 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Phillips. Senate Bill 695, this is about finding some pathways for local governments and nonprofit providers to use Medicaid in reimbursement for crisis service.
1,
Yes.
1.
for sure.
So I thought those would be the ones that could move and you would be excited about them.
Yes, very much. Good, Mike.
Yeah. I just chose the easy ones. The next is House Bill 2781, and this is on your, this is on their old school way. We're gonna be sharing the bill information.
Yeah.
This one we've supported in the past, and so I thought we would want to consider recommending support of it again.
Here's Representative Evans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So,
Are we at 1 or a 2?
Probably 1.
Okay.
I don't want to put staff to
so I will just give you all a recap of where we're at. We're gonna be putting together a packet recommendation for the February 13th council meeting agenda with a revision to the policy statements about preserving affordable housing. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 bills related to housing affordability and landlord tenant issues that will be all supported. That's Senate Bill 6111, House Bill 2761, House Bill 3042, and House Bill 2653. It's just 611 that's in support with staff. The rest of them can go as high as council in support. We have a couple that we're going to continue monitoring, 2889 and 2984. I can't remember what they're about. And CFAC, we're going to monitor the REACH code bills. We're going to monitor the 2 climate issues related to Covanta. We're going to monitor. And then we're going to seek more local control of firearms in public spaces. Senate Bill 686 and House Bill 2007. And then House Bill 2095 is a support one, that's the photo radar. And then all of the ones that benefit our unsheltered population and residents, we're gonna try to encourage. Excellent.
So this was stylistic. It came up in our last meeting. So like under the bullet points, the funds for Mayor Hoy had wanted to reorder the sustain sheltering program to have it listed as the first one of 3. I understand that practically it's not that big of a deal, but I've seen this document reproduced online and it would be helpful if it was reordered as Mayor Hoy requested.
So done.
Okay.
Also, I needed to just mention that for awareness, the Oregon Mayors Association and the League of Oregon Cities are working together to get secure a per capita allocation for local governments in sustaining sheltering programs.
Yep.
And so what we've chosen to do is through our OMA LOC ask, which is about $7.2 million. We've chosen to seek funding for the micro shelter village communities and continuation of the Math Center. And so these funding priorities are exceeding the 7.2, right? So we're going to be trying to get funding for operating the sobering center and another probably micro shelter village community, just because 7.2 doesn't cover all of our investments. So I just wanted you to be aware that if you hear Salem in support of the OMA LOC per capita allocation, that would give us 7.2 million. And we're trying to dedicate that to one portion of our sheltering programs and still advocate for the other things that we need to make the program whole.
Is there anybody looking at the airport? Bills moving forward on the airport support? I know Rebecca's
Me.
talked.
Okay, so there's only one specific to the city of Salem. I've actually sent it over to Justin. It's a study.
It's a
It's
stupidest bill I've ever
a
seen.
study asking the Department of Aviation to do a study. Within the study, the results would be to expedite commercial air service at the airport, and the study is not due until September of 2024.
So we'll already have planes
Yeah,
in the
so
air and landing
the
well
question
before
is,
this bill ever.
is it a placeholder for something else? Could there be something different? Nobody's contacted John Pascal out at the airport. So I sent it over to Justin just to find out what's behind, who asked for it.
Nobody-
But that's the only aviation Salem airport bill. There's one other aviation bill, but it's really just tied to some fees for new airports or new aircraft. But that's the only one that's popped up as of, I would say 3 days ago was the last time I searched specifically. But I'm watching for him.
Nicole, is it true that almost 3,000 bills dropped?
A little over 2,000, I think 2019.
Oh, okay, maybe
It's
I
not
inverted the
3,000,
9 and the 1 again. But the staff are reviewing all of those. Nicole is great at triage and saying the city could have an interest in this, and she pings the best representative in the topical area. And that person reaches out to anybody else on the team for help and always refers to legal for some kind of support in review and analysis. So we're taking all of those and trying to sift right now for which things could have legs fastest. And that's what we're bringing.
To your point, Courtney, Nikki just leaned over and said, Trevin doesn't know it yet, but there's 50 more bills coming. Yes.
We try to.
Lucky
award-
you.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Okay.
We try to award some, sometimes it's HR that's out in the lead and sometimes it's PD, but this year it's gonna be PD that will.
By award, she means just we recognize it verbally throughout a review.
I mean, do we all get to count the housing ones?
Thank
Because
you.
we're all
Thank you.
reviewing that. So we get to like
Everything else
take
is
one,
good.
gets 3 points,
So can I
right?
get extra stuff?
I can even kill the meeting.
Okay, great.
The meeting
So we're adjourned.